Spare. Harry's Wife's edition. Weaving a web. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, continuing my analysis of Spare, the book that was purportedly written by Harry, although, of course, it has the sticky fingerprints of Harry's wife all over it, which provides us with another glorious opportunity to appraise and understand her narcissism, whilst, of course, seeing the way that it impacts upon people. At the moment, Harry's still caught in the seduction, the golden period, when everything is sexy and fun and interesting and wonderful. This is the period that we use to draw in our victims, and I'd encourage you to watch the video The Golden Period and also The Bronze Period to understand more about how we do this. Harry explains that there's a frenzy of texting and FaceTiming. This shows a lack of boundary recognition as a consequence of the repeated hoovering that he's receiving from Harry's wife, and it demonstrates the way that she operates with a sense of entitlement, seeing nothing wrong with repeated hoovering him by text messaging him and FaceTiming him. This allows her, of course, to assert control over him in the instant through this electronic hoovering, but also to continue the steady erosion of any resistance that might exist and to bring him under control so that he becomes the intimate partner primary source. Of course, Harry is responding to all of this. It's not all one-way traffic. He's messaging back and FaceTiming her also, completely caught up in the manipulative grip that she has with regard to him, and of course his own emotional thinking, which is preventing him from seeing what's actually going on. He explained that he would wake up, he'd text, there'd be an instant reply. Then after lunch, FaceTime, through the afternoon, texting, late at night, marathon FaceTime session. Noticing that he's receiving the instant replies, that as soon as he comes up on her radar, bing, she replies, to ensure that he gets that intermittent reinforcement, that dopamine hit, and of course to ensure that she knows that he's under control and to draw the fuel from him. But Harry said it wasn't enough. They were still desperate to see one another, and they decided that they would meet at the end of August, and it would be best if she came to London. Just after she arrived, she phoned him and said that she was just walking into her room at Soho House and invited him to go and see her. But he said he couldn't because he was doing something in relation to his mother at Althorpe, which was where his Uncle Charles lived. He said that he would explain about it later on. Harry explains he felt pretty sure she hadn't Googled me. Bollocks. Again, this is a revision of history that's inserted by Harry's wife. He explained that he seemed to know absolutely nothing about royalty, and this was refreshing. Again, this has the fingerprint of Harry's wife over what's going on. He explained that she hadn't done a deep dive into the literature, and therefore her head wasn't filled with disinformation. Again, showing the paranoia that lurks with Harry. He explained that after William and he had laid flowers at his mother's grave, they went back to London, and he said that he was on his way. He went in the freight lift, and her friend Vanessa, who worked for Soho House, would meet him and usher him in. All went to plan, and he knocked at the door, and he suspended breathing while he waited. You're going to pass out, aren't you? And then, of course, we get more of the Mills and Boon shite that fills Harry's wife's world. The door flew open. Cue angels singing. That smile. Oh, it's so bright, it's so white, it's dazzling. Her hair was partly covering her eyes. Oh, she's so coquettish and inviting. Her arms were reaching for him. Not her hands, her arms. She pulled me inside and thanked her friend in one fluid motion, then slammed the door quickly before anyone saw. I want to say we hung a do not disturb sign on the door, but I don't think there was time. Yes, straight down to business, of course. Zup! And out comes little Harry, and no doubt he gets lashings of spicy poontang to ensure that he's very much kept under control. She, of course, does that as a benign manipulation, which enables her to assert control over him, draw fuel from him, going, "Oh, good God, what a tromboning that was!" And Of course, she derives pleasure from the act, which is a residual benefit. Harry, showing off, says in the morning they needed sustenance and called room service. And when they knocked at the door, he looked around for somewhere to hide. So he lay on the bed and pulled the duvet over his head. Harry's wife apparently told him to go into the bathroom, but he was happy where he was. Perhaps the dirty little pervert was sniffing the bedsheets. The breakfast wasn't delivered by an anonymous waiter, but it was brought by a hotel assistant manager who loved Harry's wife. What, of course she would do, because doesn't everybody love Harry's wife? And therefore she wanted to chat. Apparently she didn't notice that there were 2 breakfasts on the tray. Bollocks, of course she did. And didn't notice the prince-shaped lump under the duvet. What's a prince-shaped lump like, then? Is that different from another human being? Perhaps it is, because they're a sort of pancakes, so where you'd expect to see some bollocks, they don't appear. Maybe that's what gives it away. Eventually, the individual left, and he sat up gasping. I don't know why, and she Dutch ovened him. And then they were laughing so hard. Well, fascinating, huh? Thereafter, it was time to go to Waitrose, apparently, because they wanted to go to his place. And this is a section which I've actually only just covered as a consequence of it being brought up in a news article about the fact that nobody was staring at her. So I needn't go through that again, as I've already covered it. The fact is that they went off to Waitrose and of course, nobody recognised her, which Harry thinks is surprising, because he would recognise her in a crowd of thousands, but of course, nobody would, because nobody knows who the fuck she is, despite her deluded mind believing that everybody understands who she is. And apparently, nobody looked twice at her trolley, which was filled with her suitcases, and 2 large Soho house bags containing fluffy dressing gowns she bought on checking out. What? She hadn't half-inched them? Goodness me. Then Harry explained that he grabbed a basket and he casually walked up and down the aisles. Beside the fruit and veg, he felt her stroll past, but he said it was more of a saunter than a stroll, very saucy. Well, indeed it would be. After all, Harry, did you not see the way that she sashayed down the aisle at the service of booing? As I mentioned before, every action where Harry's wife is involving somebody else, it's a performance. Thereafter, apparently, Harry's wife had cut out a roasted salmon recipe from Food and Wine. Well, surely she would know how to do this herself, wouldn't she? Because she's such a brilliant foodie. Wouldn't you just be able to say, here are some ingredients, what are you going to do with it? And she immediately knows. Evidently not. And then, and interestingly, I seem to recall this cropped up in Finding Freedom. So we have a bit of duplication going on here. She was in charge of finding a baking sheet, while he had to find parchment paper. And he didn't know what that was, because, of course, it's referred to as something else in Britain. And apparently she talked him onto the target, telling him it was above his head. And they found that funny. And they were cackling. And they got through their list. And then he paid at the checkout. She's letting him pay, you see. Asset acquisition. And then he texted her where to meet. And then the shopping was snug in the boot. Billy the Rock was at the wheel. And they headed off for Knotcott. And he thought to himself, I can't wait for you all to meet her. Well, that's understandable. And it shows how infatuated Harry is in this early stage of the golden period. But of course, she's weaving him into her web. On this other visit, providing him with the spicy poontang, the flattery, the giggles, and all the laughs, he thinks that he's found someone amazing and wonderful, because that's the illusion that he's being given. But on to next, it's the frat house. Join me there.